It was 5:30 a.m. over the Sea of Azov, that fragile, silver strip of water where the horizon still remembers the night. A Russian Buyan-M Corvette sat at readiness, 8 Kalibr cruise missiles locked and loaded, engines humming with intent. On deck, the crew went through drills, unaware that, within minutes, their routine sortie would be swallowed by an attack no textbook could fully explain. An assault fought not by fleets or squadrons of jets, but by 7 tiny machines skimming the water like ghosts. This is the story of how low-cost drones rewrote the rules of naval warfare in a matter of minutes. As dawn barely peeled back the night, the Corvette's radar painted the surface with a handful of blips, tiny, fleeting traces that at first looked like clutter. For the crew, this was the kind of noise you saw on long patrols, sea birds, weather anomalies, or glitches. What those dots actually were would soon make history. Across the invisible line of front, an elite Ukrainian cell known simply as Kraken watched every movement. Kraken was not a conventional squadron. It was a carefully assembled machine of human skill and DIY engineering. 7 unmanned aerial vehicles, each optimized for a role in a single, synchronized strike. 2 types dominated the formation: the Rubaka, razor-fast, nimble, designed to bait, weave, and outrun defenses, and the Bober, heavier, lumbering carriers built to carry destructive payloads and finish what the Rubaka began. This duo, spear and hammer, was the plan? The sea route to the Corvette was ringed with layered defenses. At the first throat of the approach, mounted on trucks, stood Zu-23 twin 23mm anti-aircraft cannons. These were lethal for low-flying targets, rapid-firing, and manned by crews trained to shred anything that violated their corridor. But the drones had a different set of strengths. They waltzed beneath thermal thresholds and hugged the sea surface so closely that heat signatures and silhouette detection failed to pick them out. In short, they became invisible. The lead Rubaka, under a Kraken operator's steady hand, unleashed its engines and surged. It hit speeds north of 260 miles per hour, slicing through salt spray and dawn mist, dancing in tight zigzags over the waves to avoid bursts from the Zu-23s. Each evasive move was precise, not reckless. A choreographed ballet that left a trail of tracers and a cleared lane for the squadron behind it. But that firefight did more than threaten the drones. It blew Kraken's cover. Within minutes, bursts of radio chatter and messages on Telegram groups spread along the coastline. Local garrisons goose-stepped into alert. The element of surprise, Kraken's most precious advantage, began to slip. The sky above the Azov turned into an invisible web, sensors pinging, jammas humming, crews scanning for ghosts. As the formation pressed on, the lead Rubaka plunged into a hazardous corridor filled with power lines and rigging. For 3 terrifying seconds, the drones, cameras, and telemetry died, black out. The operator watched helplessly as feed after feed went blank. It was the aviation equivalent of stumbling blind. Then, as if guided by mechanical instinct, the drone's onboard systems recovered. Its inertial sensors and optical processors kicked in, and it steadied on course. Each regained meter felt borrowed. Every inch forward cost something the operator would never show on the telemetry logs. Soon after, the electronic horizon lit up. Russian EW units deployed a Repellent 1 system, a heavy jammer mounted on trucks that pumped hundreds of watts of electromagnetic noise across control bands. The air itself turned to static, remote links sputtered. But Kraken had anticipated this. Before launch, each drone had been loaded with fallback navigation for programmed reference routes, accelerometer guidance, and visual landmark recognition. When the radio silence fell, the drones gracefully transitioned to autonomous mode, blind for their human pilots, but precise for their machines. The blockades intent to blind them had been countered by redundant autonomy. Once comms restored, Kraken's strategy revealed itself in brutal clarity. The Rubaka acted as spears, fast, distracting, and designed to overwork Russian sensors. They zipped and toggled, forcing radars to lock and relock, saturating the Corvette's detection with multiple, overlapping vectors. Behind them came the Bober, the hammers. Slower, but burdened with heavier warheads, the Bobers didn't need speed when they had explosive intent. The goal was simple: break the ship's ability to see and respond, then strike the structure that enabled that perception. On land, the layered Russian defense responded methodically. A BTR-82 armored vehicle rolled into a blocking position, its automatic 30mm cannons sweeping the horizon. But Kraken's operators turned terrain into an ally. One Rubaka hugged the walls of an abandoned industrial complex, using broken concrete and rusted steel as physical blinders against line-of-sight fire. The BTR-82, deprived of a clear view, wasted rounds on nothing more than sea spray and echoes. The most effective trick, however, wasn't cunning or armor, it was altitude. The drones kept themselves at roughly 10 meters above the sea, inside what operators call the radar shadow. Because the Earth curves, radars sighted on hills or vehicles lose effective range against targets hugging the surface. Systems that theoretically reached 50 kilometers found their horizon cut in half against these low flyers. It was an invisible corridor, a lane under the eyes of bigger sensors. As the Buyan-M's crew tightened their alert, the true test loomed. The ship itself was not defenseless. On its deck sat the Pantsir-M system, the naval variant purpose-built to defeat small, fast aerial threats, kamikaze drones, sea-skimming missiles, and anything that threatened a vessel up close. The Pantsir-M's interceptors were engineered to fire tiny, tungsten-packed projectiles that blossomed into lethal clouds, brutal and precise. But engineering comes with trade-offs. The lead Rubaka did the unthinkable. Instead of fleeing the moment the Pantsir fired, the pilot dove straight toward the launcher. At 268 miles per hour, the drone could cover roughly 144 meters in that 1.2-second window, and the operator used that split second like a scalpel. The interceptor assumed it would arm and detonate. The Rubaka, already below the danger zone, rode the gap. When the Pantsir's rounds blossomed into their cloud of metal, the drone was already beneath the burst, intact and continuing at full speed. That gamble paid off. Seconds later, Rubaka found contact with the Buyan-M's critical sensors, the Podlet K1 low-altitude radar, and the veteran P-18 VHF early warning spoon rest radar. Both systems were smashed in impact. The Corvette's eyes were surgically removed. Once the main radars failed, the Buyan-M was effectively blind. It had only its short-range, organic sensors left, a handful of tense minutes before high-speed threats would close. The mathematics were cruel. Drones over 250 miles per hour cut whatever warning margin the crew had to less than 2 minutes. It's one thing to fight an enemy you can see. It's another to swing into action against invisible streaks of metal that appear with the inevitability of a train. The Buyan-M's crew threw everything into the last defenses. The AK-630M to Duet, twin 30mm cannons designed to feed a wall of lead against incoming missiles, spun up, able in theory to create an impenetrable curtain. Around them, sailors manned PKM machine guns, eyes peeled for any shadow that might be a drone. But physics and timing had already stacked the deck. The Duet's fire control takes 3.5 seconds to compute trajectory and engage. Kraken's operators programmed erratic course changes every 2 seconds. The Duets simply could not lock onto the changing profiles. Moreover, the cannons had mechanical depression limits. They could not swing low enough to engage threats hugging the water. The combination of human reaction times, mechanical constraints, and smart, frequent course changes made the Corvette's last line of defense inadequate. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the button, and keep watching for what happens next. The Bober entered then, heavy, blunt, decisive. The first Bober dove straight into the Corvette's main mast. The strike silenced remaining communications and auxiliary radars, rendering the vessel deaf and mute. Seconds later, a second Bober smashed into the missile magazine bay. The initial detonation didn't set off every Kalibr in the hold, but the ensuing fire-gutted systems, cooked wiring, and rendered the launch tubes and their electronics useless. What had been a ship poised to unleash devastation on cities was now a burning hulk, flames licking across its decks, alarms drowning in smoke. 12 hours later, the Buyan-M limped into port, a battered hull, smoke still rising from charred superstructure, pockmarked by impacts and shrapnel. Its mission had been aborted, its reputation had been shredded. The final balance sheet was a brutal lesson. A $500 million warship rendered combatant effective by drones that cost only a fraction of that value. For the Russians, the event was humiliation, not just material but doctrinal. For the Ukrainians, it was a strategic and symbolic victory, an asymmetric demonstration that ingenuity, planning, and adaptive tactics could overcome raw hardware. The strike didn't just destroy metal and electronics. It exposed the changing calculus of modern warfare. Size, tonnage, and price tags matter less when nimble, low-cost platforms can exploit physical gaps and micro-timing in complex systems. What made Kraken's operation textbook worthy was not merely the drones themselves. It was the fusion of reconnaissance, redundancy, and audacious execution. They researched the Pantsir-M specs. They rehearsed fallback navigation for EW-rich environments. They synchronized the spears and hammers to overload reaction chains. Above all, they were willing to accept small losses, a drone here, a telemetry glitch there, in exchange for a decisive payoff. The engagement exposed serious questions for modern navies. How do you patch a radar gap created by the curvature of the Earth? How do you counter swarms that combine autonomous modes with tight operator control? How much does human reaction time, combined with mechanical latency, condemn a larger platform to vulnerability? The answers are not purely technical. They require doctrine shifts, new sensor mixes, and a rethink of how layered defenses are structured against agile, low-signature threats. If you think this story ends with one damaged Corvette, think again. This engagement offers a snapshot of a larger revolution unfolding at sea and on land. Small drones, clever tactics, and synchronized automation are rewriting the rule book. Navies and armies must adapt or find that the giants of yesterday can be felled by pennies today. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel.